Sometimes, even when nothing around you seems especially wrong, you still feel heavy inside, a vague sense of unease, as if the mind refuses to stay in the present and keeps pulling you from one thought into another worry. According to the teachings of the Buddha, suffering does not always come from circumstances. Very often, it arises from the mind itself when it becomes entangled in stories that have not happened yet and memories that have not been released. In those moments, you may appear calm on the outside, yet inside feels like a storm. Each thought collides with another, creating tension, exhaustion, and a sense of being lost. What is most easily forgotten in times like these is a simple truth. Beneath all that movement, there is still a part of you that is untouched, a quiet, open space that has never disappeared. This video does not try to fix you, nor does it pressure you to change right away. It simply invites you to pause for a moment, breathe a little slower, realize that you do not need to continue this inner battle. If your mind feels too noisy and your heart is searching for a place to rest, then this journey is for you. Lesson 1. Thoughts are not the truth. When you begin to look deeply into your worries, the Buddha teaches that the first thing to recognize is that thoughts do not always reflect the truth. The human mind operates constantly, jumping from one idea to another, like a monkey that refuses to stay still on a branch. When difficult circumstances arise, that monkey becomes even more restless, dragging along a stream of assumptions, judgments, and rushed conclusions. You may hear familiar voices in your head saying, "I am not good enough. Everything is going to fall apart, or I will never get through this." These thoughts feel very real, but according to the Buddha's teaching, they are simply products of a mind conditioned by fear and old memories. They are not the absolute truth about who you are or what your future holds. Buddhism does not ask you to eliminate thoughts, because that is nearly impossible. Instead, you are invited to learn how to see your thoughts from a gentler distance. Imagine your mind as a vast sky, and your thoughts as clouds drifting across it. Some clouds are bright, some are dark, some are thick and heavy, but none of them are the sky. The sky is not harmed by the appearance or disappearance of clouds. In the same way, your true nature is the quiet awareness behind all thoughts, not defined by their content. When an anxious thought appears, you do not need to argue with it or try to push it away. Simply notice its presence. Silently, you can say to yourself, "Ah, this is just a thought." This simple practice helps you step out of the habit of immediately believing everything the mind tells you. Over time, you begin to see thoughts come and go, while your presence remains steady and grounded. When you no longer identify yourself with every passing thought, worry gradually loses its power. Peace does not come from controlling the mind, but from clearly seeing that you are not the mind. This awareness opens a wider inner space where you learn to live with your thoughts in a calm and balanced way. Lesson 2. Focus on the present, not the prediction. Worry often does not arise from what is happening, but from the mind leaving the present moment and wandering into a future that does not yet exist. When there is not enough information, the mind begins to write its own script, blending old fears with new assumptions, then believing that these stories are about to become reality. According to the teachings of the Buddha, this very departure from the present gives rise to unease. The future is only an idea, yet the anxiety it creates feels very real in both body and mind. The present moment is the only place where you are truly standing. Here, there is the breath moving in and out. Here, there is a body being supported. Here, life is unfolding without asking you to solve your entire existence. When you remain with this moment, the mind has a chance to settle, no longer chasing what has not happened. In the present, you may notice that you are still okay, even if the story in your head says otherwise. Anxiety often insists that you must know the next step, be certain about the road ahead, and prepare for every possible outcome. But the Buddha's teaching does not require such prediction. It simply invites you back to the most basic thing. The next breath. When the mind is pulled away by a flood of questions, place a hand on your belly or your chest and feel one breath coming in and one breath going out. There is no need to change the rhythm of the breath, only to know that it is here. In the moment you bring attention to the breath, the mind no longer has enough space to continue building frightening scenarios. Awareness returning to the body allows the nervous system to soften. The body recognizes that danger is not here and now. You do not need to figure out the next 5 steps. You only need this step. Each time worry arises, see it as a signal to return. Return to the feeling of your feet touching the ground. Return to the sounds around you. Return to the presence unfolding in silence. When you live fully in this moment, the future no longer occupies the entire mind. Worry gradually loses its strength because it is no longer fed by your absence. The present moment, when lived completely, becomes a steady refuge for the mind amid life's changes. There, awareness grows, bringing a sense of inner trust that helps you remain steady through change, neither avoiding difficulty nor being swept away by fear. Lesson 3. Control. What you can control. The deeper source of human worry often comes from the desire to control everything. You want life to follow your plans, you want others to behave according to your expectations, and you want your efforts to always lead to certain outcomes. Yet according to the teachings of the Buddha, this very craving for control creates suffering. Life is constantly changing. People change, circumstances change. When you try to hold on to what cannot be held, the mind becomes tense and restless. The Buddha used many ways to point out that control is a subtle illusion. You can imagine holding sand in your hand. When your palm is open, the sand rests there. When you tighten your grip, the grains begin to slip through your fingers. The more force you use, the more you lose. Life works in the same way. The more you try to force everything to go your way, the more powerless you feel when reality does not meet your expectations. The truth is that you cannot control the weather, the words of others, or unexpected events. But Buddhism does not teach you to give up. It simply invites you to look again at what truly lies within your capacity. You can regulate your breath. You can choose your attitude. You can decide how you respond to circumstances. When you recognize this boundary, the mind begins to feel lighter. In Buddhism, this state of mind is called equanimity or letting go. It is not coldness or indifference. It is the ability to remain steady in the midst of change. When things do not go as planned, you can still stay grounded within. When harsh words appear, you can breathe before responding. When plans fall apart, you can pause and notice a new path beginning to open. The practice is simple, but it requires patience. Each time you feel tense because you want to control the outcome, ask yourself this: is this within my control? If not, can I release it? If it is, can I act with awareness and without attachment? These questions guide you back to your true source of strength. When you stop trying to control the outside world, energy is returned to your inner life. You begin to feel more stable, not because everything becomes easy, but because you are no longer being dragged along by circumstances. As a gentle reminder from the Buddha's teaching, you do not need to control everything. You only need to control how you respond. This is where inner freedom begins. From this place of equanimity, you learn to walk through life without losing yourself, preserving inner calm, trusting your inner resources, and continuing to live with depth, steadiness, and lasting peace. Lesson 4. Your worst days still built you. The darkest days of your life often leave the deepest marks on the soul. When you go through loss, brokenness, illness, or failure, you may have believed that you were permanently damaged. That pain is real, and Buddhism does not deny it. Yet the Buddha pointed out that suffering does not arise without meaning. When seen with wisdom, it can become a profound source of understanding. Imagine a seed buried deep beneath the soil. In the damp darkness, it bears the weight of earth pressing down on it. From the outside, this looks like a harsh and suffocating environment. But it is precisely this darkness that allows the seed to crack open and sprout. Without the pressure of the soil, the seed could never grow. In the same way, Your worst days did not only weigh you down, they were also quietly forming strength within you. When suffering appears, the natural human response is to resist, escape, or blame oneself. You may want to forget the past or wish it had never existed. However, according to the Buddha's teaching, denying pain only causes it to linger longer. When you have the courage to stay with your pain and observe it with mindfulness, something transformative begins to happen. You learn how to feel without being drowned by feeling, how to cry without losing yourself. In Buddhism, there's a deeply meaningful image called turning poison into medicine. The poison represents painful experiences, wounds, and loss. The medicine is the wisdom, compassion, and understanding that arise from those very experiences. Like a skilled healer who knows how to extract medicine from a poisonous plant, you too can learn to draw meaning from adversity. Pain teaches humility because you clearly see your limits. It teaches compassion because you understand what it feels like to hurt. It teaches patience because you realize that healing takes time. Your worst days also awaken qualities that peaceful times may never touch. You learn how to rise after falling, how to continue even when certainty is gone, how to place one foot in front of the other when faith feels fragile. From this, a quiet inner strength is formed. It is not loud or showy, but it is steady. When you look back at the past through the light of awareness, you may begin to see that you did not merely survive. You grew. Your scars are no longer proof of weakness, but signs of life. The Buddha taught that every moment of suffering can become a doorway to awakening if we step through it with understanding. When you stop seeing the past as an enemy and begin to recognize it as a teacher, your heart softens. Healing then is no longer about erasing what happened, but about holding it with wisdom and compassion so you can continue walking more gently forward. Lesson 5. Not everything deserves a reaction. In daily life, much of our energy is drained not by major events, but by small reactions that happen again and again. A careless remark from someone else, an unexpected situation on the road, or a fleeting self-critical thought can be enough to pull the mind away from peace. According to the teachings of the Buddha, not everything that appears in life requires an immediate reaction. Each time you react without awareness, you hand over control of your mind to external circumstances. Reactions often happen very quickly. They arise before you even realize what you're feeling. Someone says something unpleasant and you respond. Something goes wrong and the mind tightens at once. In that moment, energy is depleted without bringing any real solution. Buddhist wisdom points out that the space between stimulus and reaction is where inner freedom appears. When you are able to pause, you gain the chance to choose instead of being swept away. The core practice here is to pause, observe, and then choose how to respond. When something touches you, first allow yourself to stop. There is no need to say anything, no need to do anything. Simply notice what is arising in the body. It may be heat in the chest, tension in the jaw, or a quickening heartbeat. As you observe these signals, you are no longer completely identified with the reaction. You become the witness rather than the one being pulled along. In communication with others, this is especially important. There are moments when someone speaks harshly, not because of you, but because of their own pain. If you react immediately, conflict easily escalates and both sides lose their peace. But if you pause and breathe, you can choose silence or respond with a softer tone. This choice does not make you weak. It shows that inner strength is growing. On the road or in stressful traffic situations, reactions also arise easily. A car cuts in front of you, a sudden honk sounds, and irritation flares up. If you let reaction take over, the body tightens, the breath becomes shallow, and the tension lasts far longer than the actual situation. When you pause and observe, you realize that those few seconds are not worth trading for the peace of an entire day. You can breathe out more slowly, relax your shoulders, and continue on without carrying anger with you. Another subtle source of reaction comes from within. It is the constant judging voice. When you make a mistake, or fall short of your expectations, that voice immediately speaks up, telling you that you are not good enough, that you have failed. If you react by believing it, you fall into a spiral of self-blame and heaviness. Buddhism invites you to see that voice as a mental phenomenon, not your true nature. When it appears, you can recognize it without arguing with it or obeying it. A simple practice encouraged by the Buddha is to bring attention back to the body. When strong emotions rise, place one hand on your chest or your belly. Feel the warmth of your hand and the rhythm of the breath moving in and out. Take 3 deep breaths. In that brief space, reaction no longer fully controls you. You create room to choose. Over time, not reacting immediately becomes a new habit. You do not lose your emotions, but you are no longer carried away by them. You conserve your energy for what truly matters. The Buddha taught that wisdom does not lie in reacting to everything, but in knowing what deserves your attention. When you no longer react to every disturbance, the mind grows steadier. Worry gradually weakens because you stop feeding it. Peace no longer depends on the outside world, but is nourished by your ability to pause and choose in each moment of living. Lesson 6. Reframe the problem as a path. When facing a major problem, the familiar human reaction is to see it as an obstacle that must be avoided or removed. The mind easily falls into a sense of being stuck, as if the road ahead has been completely blocked. According to the teachings of the Buddha, this very way of seeing makes suffering feel heavier. A problem in itself is not always a dead end. Very often, it is a door closing to invite you to look in another direction. Reframing or shifting perspective does not mean denying pain. Buddhism does not teach you to pretend that everything is fine when you are hurting inside. On the contrary, transformation begins with fully acknowledging that you are struggling. But instead of asking why this is happening to me, you are gently invited to ask a different question. What is this situation asking me to learn? When the question changes, the energy changes. Fear gradually gives way to curiosity. Imagine walking along a familiar path and suddenly encountering a large fallen tree blocking the way. If you stop and insist that you must continue on the same path, you will only feel frustrated and powerless. But if you accept that the way has changed, you may look around and discover a smaller path nearby. That new path may be narrower and more difficult, but it still allows you to move forward. Along the way, you may notice things you had never seen before. Life's problems work in a similar way. When a relationship ends, you may see it as a failure. But if you look more deeply, that experience may be teaching you about boundaries, self-respect, or needs that were never heard. When your work reaches a deadlock, instead of seeing it as the end, you can ask whether this is an invitation to discover another capacity within yourself. This shift in direction does not erase sadness, but it gives sadness meaning. In Buddhism, there is an important insight that suffering is a teacher. It reveals the attachments and resistance operating within the mind. When you face difficulty directly, you begin to see what you are clinging to, what you are afraid of losing, and how you are resisting change. Recognizing this helps you loosen your grip, little by little. The practice of reframing begins by pausing before the habitual reaction. When a problem arises, notice the first story the mind tells. It may be a story of failure, injustice, or hopelessness. Instead of immediately believing that story, gently ask yourself whether there is another way to see this. What might this situation be opening that I have not yet seen? The question does not need an immediate answer. Simply placing it there already softens the mind. When you see the problem as a path, you no longer stand still in fear. You move forward with cautious curiosity. Each step may still hurt, but it carries direction. According to the Buddha's teaching, life is always in motion, and no state lasts forever. The moments when you feel most stuck are often when a transformation is preparing to unfold. Gradually, you realize that you are not a victim of circumstances, but a learner within them. The problem is no longer only something to overcome, but becomes part of the path of practice. When you walk with this understanding, worry begins to lose its weight. In its place grows a sense of trust that even when the path is winding, each mindful step brings you closer to clarity and inner peace. Lesson 7. Faith is the antidote to fear. When fear arises, it often comes together with uncertainty. You do not know what will happen next. You are not sure whether you have enough strength to face it, and the mind begins to draw dark scenarios. According to the teachings of the Buddha, fear is not a sign of weakness. It is simply the natural response of the mind when standing before the unknown. But without an inner anchor, fear can easily fill the entire inner space and begin to guide every decision. In Buddhism, faith is not blind belief. The Buddha did not ask you to believe anything simply because it was spoken. Faith here is a trust built from direct experience. It is the confidence that arises when you look back at your life and realize that you have already passed through very difficult periods. At those times, you may have felt afraid, confused, and convinced that you could not go on. Yet somehow, you did. That memory itself becomes the foundation of faith. Each time fear whispers that you are not strong enough, faith gently reminds you that you have been stronger than you thought before. When the mind insists that this time is different, that this time is too much to bear, faith does not argue. It simply invites you to remember the moments when you stood up after falling. Not to deny the current difficulty, but to remind you that the capacity to face it has always been there. Another important pillar of faith in Buddhism is the insight into impermanence. Everything changes. Emotions change. Circumstances change. Even the most painful periods do not last forever. When this truth truly sinks in, fear begins to soften. Not because the problem disappears, but because you no longer believe it will last endlessly. You understand that like all things in life, it will transform. Understanding impermanence does not make you passive. On the contrary, it helps you panic less. Knowing that this pain will change its form allows you to remain with the present moment more calmly. Faith at this point is not vague hope, but trust in the natural flow of life. You allow yourself to move step by step without needing to see the entire path. Faith is also nourished through connection. In the time of the Buddha, spiritual communities gathered to listen to the teachings and share experiences of transforming suffering. When you hear the stories of others, you realize that you are not alone. Others have also been afraid, also lost their way, yet still found peace. These stories become guiding lights, helping you trust that healing is possible. Practicing faith does not require anything grand. Each time you return to the breath instead of panicking, faith is strengthened. Each time you choose to pause rather than react in fear, faith is nurtured. You do not need certainty about outcomes. You only need to trust that awareness will guide you in the right direction. The Buddha taught that faith and effort always walk together. You do not sit and wait for miracles. You walk with full presence. When fear appears, you can gently ask yourself what within you is asking to be trusted more. It may be your ability to adapt. It may be patience. It may be support that you have not yet allowed yourself to receive. Faith does not erase fear, but it changes your relationship with fear. You are no longer controlled by it, but listen to it as a signal to return to inner steadiness. Gradually, faith becomes a feeling of being supported, not by an external force, but by a deep understanding of yourself and life. You trust that whatever happens, you can meet it with mindfulness and compassion. As this trust grows, fear no longer paralyzes you. It becomes part of the journey, gently reminding you to return to the breath, to the present moment, and to the quiet strength that has always lived within you. The teachings that have just been shared are not meant to erase the difficulties in your life. They simply remind you that even in the most unstable periods, there is a place within you that remains unmoved. When you understand that thoughts are not the truth, you are less carried away. When you return to the present moment, you find a place of safety. When you release the illusion of control, you preserve your vital energy. When you look back on your darkest days with wisdom, you see that you were built, not broken. When you do not react to every disturbance, you protect your peace. When you see problems as a path, You keep moving forward, and when you nurture faith grounded in experience and impermanence, fear no longer rules you. Buddhism does not promise a life without suffering, but it offers you the ability to move through suffering with awareness and compassion. Each mindful breath, each moment of pausing, is a step back home. You do not need to change everything today. Simply carry one small thing from these teachings with you and practice it when you need it.